Eliza Bennet, her camera bag slung over her shoulder and tripod under her arm, arrived in the sleepy village of Marshwood Vale under the weight of an overcast sky. The air was tinged with the scent of impending rain and decaying leaves, a stark reminder of the approaching autumn. She made her way to the only inn in town, the Drover's Stop, where she planned to meet with the local historian, Mr. Hawthorne. As she pushed open the wooden door, a small bell rang above her head, announcing her arrival. The inside of the inn was dimly lit, cozy, with a fire crackling in the hearth. A few locals looked up from their drinks, curiosity plain in their eyes. "Can I help you, miss?" the bartender asked, wiping his hands on a cloth. "I'm here to meet Mr. Hawthorne." "I believe he's expecting me," Eliza replied, adjusting the strap of her camera bag. "Yes. He mentioned a young lady would be coming by." "He's right over there by the fireplace," the bartender pointed. Eliza thanked him and walked over to where an elderly man sat, his eyes deeply set, framed by thick eyebrows and a swath of white hair. He looked up from a large, open book and smiled. "Miss Bennet, I presume? I'm Edgar Hawthorne. Please, have a seat." He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. It's a pleasure to meet you," Eliza said, taking the seat. "I've heard a lot about the local folklore. Especially about the creeper of Marshwood Vale." "Yes, the creeper," Edgar's voice lowered, almost instinctively. "A tale that's been part of this village for generations. Dangerous, some say. What brings you out here, chasing such stories?" Eliza pulled out her camera, placing it on the table gently. "I'm a photographer, Mr. Hawthorne. I specialize in capturing the essence of local legends and folklore. There's something profoundly compelling about bringing such stories to light, don't you think?" Edgar nodded slowly. "Indeed, there is. But the creeper is not just a story, Miss Bennet. It's an entity, alive, breathing, and, according to some, cursed. You should be very careful." "I intend to be," Eliza assured him. "I've come during the blood moon specifically because I've read that's when the creeper is most active. Is there any particular place I should start looking?" "The old swamp west of here. That's where most sightings have been reported. But remember, it's not just about being careful of the creeper. The swamp itself is treacherous, muddy, easy to get lost in, especially at night." "I appreciate the warning," Eliza replied, her eyes alight with the thrill of the adventure ahead. "Would you happen to have a map of the area, or know someone who does?" "Indeed, I do," Edgar said, turning to pull a drawer open beside him. He rummaged around for a moment before pulling out a folded, somewhat faded map. "Here you are. This should help you navigate the swamp and the surrounding woods. Just promise me you'll heed my warnings." Eliza took the map, unfolding it and studying the marked areas. "I promise, Mr. Hawthorne. And thank you. This is exactly what I needed. Be mindful, Miss Bennet. The blood moon is no ordinary night, and the creeper is no ordinary creature. It's said that it guards the secrets of the swamp, and it doesn't take kindly to intruders." With a final nod of gratitude, Eliza stood, shouldering her equipment. "I'll be careful. Thank you for your help and for the map. I hope to share my photographs with you once I return. Safe journey, Miss Bennet. And remember, some truths might be better left unphotographed." With those parting words echoing in her mind, Eliza stepped out of the inn and into the chilling embrace of the upcoming night, her heart beating with anticipation and a hint of fear. The adventure was just beginning, and the mysteries of the blood moon awaited. Eliza left the warm, flickering light of the Drover's Stop behind, stepping into the cool twilight that blanketed Marshwood Vale. She headed west, towards the swamp, the map Mr. Hawthorne had given her folded in her pocket. The path was barely visible, a narrow strip of dirt weaving through thickening trees and overgrown brush that whispered with the wind. As the sky darkened, a full moon began to rise, tinged with an eerie red, the blood moon. Eliza's footsteps were soft on the forest floor, her senses heightened as she adjusted her camera settings for the low light. She could feel the pulse of the ancient forest around her, alive with nocturnal creatures stirring in the shadows. Suddenly, a soft voice drifted through the trees, melodic and almost too faint to hear. Eliza stopped, her heart skipping a beat. "Hello," she called out, peering into the darkness. There was no response, just the rustle of leaves. Shaking off the unnerving feeling, she continued deeper into the woods. The air grew damp and heavy as she neared the swamp. The ground became soggier under her boots, the smell of decay more pronounced. Eliza checked her map under the light of her flashlight, confirming she was heading in the right direction. "Who's there?" a voice suddenly asked from behind a large, twisted willow. Eliza jumped, turning quickly. A figure stepped from the shadow of the trees, an old woman leaning on a gnarled walking stick. "I might ask you the same," Eliza replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman chuckled, a sound as rough as the bark of the trees around them. "I'm Mabel, the herb woman of these parts. What brings a young thing like you out here on the night of the blood moon? Don't you know it's dangerous?" "I'm here to capture the legend of the creeper," Eliza explained, lowering her camera. "Mr. Hawthorne told me about the sightings." Mabel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Ah, Edgar sent you, did he? Then you must be serious. But take heed, child. This swamp is not just mud and water. It's a living, breathing place. It knows you're here, and so does the creeper." "How do I protect myself?" Eliza asked, curiosity piqued by the woman's ominous tone. "Respect," Mabel said simply. "Respect the swamp and keep your wits about you. Listen more than you walk. See more than you seek." Eliza nodded, absorbing the cryptic advice. "Thank you, Mabel. Have you ever seen the creeper?" Mabel smiled, a secretive, knowing smile. "Seen it? Child, I've lived here my whole life. I've felt its gaze more times than I can count. But it's not for me to say whether it's a beast, a spirit, or something else. That's for you to discover on your own." With that, Mabel turned and disappeared into the forest as silently as she had appeared. Eliza stood there for a moment, unsettled yet driven by the old woman's words. She turned on her camera again, setting it to record, and whispered into the darkness, "I come with respect." The swamp lay ahead, shrouded in mist and moonlight, and as Eliza stepped forward, the whispers in the woods grew louder, as if the very trees were speaking to her. With each step, she felt the weight of countless eyes upon her, watching, waiting to see what this human dared to uncover under the light of the blood moon. Eliza pressed on, her path illuminated only by the faint glow of the blood moon filtering through the dense canopy above. The air grew colder as she ventured deeper into the swamp. The ground beneath her feet squished and squelched with every step, the sound unnervingly loud in the oppressive silence of the night. Her heart raced, a mix of adrenaline and fear pumping through her veins as she adjusted her camera settings for the umpteenth time. The fog thickened, swirling around her like wraiths dancing in the moonlight. Eliza paused to listen, holding her breath. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a feeling of being watched that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. Suddenly, a faint rustling noise came from ahead. Eliza raised her camera, her finger ready on the shutter. The mist parted slightly, and for a brief moment she saw it, the creeper. It was eerily silhouetted against the moonlit swamp, its eyes a pair of glowing red orbs that seemed to pierce through the fog directly into her soul. Eliza's breath caught in her throat. She managed to whisper, "I mean no harm," her voice trembling. The creeper tilted its head as if considering her words. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it vanished back into the mist. Eliza stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had seen the legendary creature, and it was more terrifying and majestic than she could have imagined. Her mind raced with questions and fear, yet a part of her was exhilarated by the encounter. "Did you see it?" a voice suddenly called out from behind her. Eliza spun around, her camera still raised defensively. A young man emerged from the shadows, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Nathan," he said, stepping into the moonlight. Eliza lowered her camera slightly, eyeing him warily. "Eliza, are you following me?" "No, not exactly," Nathan chuckled nervously. "I saw you talking to Mabel earlier. I'm studying the wildlife here, and well, the creeper is part of that, isn't it? I heard you were looking for it and thought maybe we could help each other." Eliza considered him for a moment before nodding slowly. "Did you see it just now?" "Just a glimpse," Nathan admitted, his eyes wide with excitement and fear. "It's incredible, isn't it? How it just blends into the fog. Yes, incredible, Eliza agreed, her mind still replaying the sight of the glowing red eyes. But we should be careful. It might not appreciate being observed. Nathan nodded in agreement. Absolutely. I've been reading about it, and all the stories suggest it's a protector of the swamp. Maybe it shows itself only to those it deems respectful or worthy. Or a threat, Eliza added, her grip tightening on her camera. We should keep moving but stay alert. And try to keep quiet. Together, they moved deeper into the swamp, the sounds of their careful steps mingling with the natural chorus of the night. The blood moon cast a surreal light over the landscape, creating elongated shadows that twisted and turned with their movements. Eliza felt the weight of the night upon them, a palpable presence that was as much a part of the swamp as the trees and the mist. Eliza and Nathan progressed cautiously through the dense fog, their senses on high alert. The swamp seemed to breathe around them, with every rustle and drip magnified in the still night. The blood moon hung heavily above, casting an ominous glow that seemed to flicker with their every step. Suddenly, Nathan froze, grabbing Eliza's arm. "Did you hear that?" he whispered urgently. Eliza listened intently, her heart thudding in her ears. There it was again, a low guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "Yes," she breathed out. "It's close." They turned in a slow circle, trying to pinpoint the direction of the sound. Eliza's camera was poised, her finger trembling on the shutter button. The growl came again, louder this time, and they both jumped when a large shadow moved rapidly through the fog. "It's watching us," Nathan murmured, his voice laced with fear. Eliza nodded, her eyes scanning the swirling mist. "We need to keep moving. If we stay in one spot, we're sitting ducks." She took a step forward, but the ground beneath her suddenly gave way, sending her slipping into a shallow, muddy pit. "Eliza!" Nathan exclaimed, reaching down to pull her up. As Eliza grasped his hand, the growl erupted into a fierce roar, and the creeper emerged from the fog, its eyes blazing red in the murky light. Eliza scrambled to her feet, her heart racing as she raised her camera. "Run!" she shouted, and they both took off, the creeper in swift pursuit. The chase was frantic, with Eliza and Nathan dodging twisted roots and thick underbrush. The creeper was relentless, its movements eerily silent despite its speed. Eliza dared a glance back and saw the creature leap over a fallen log with unnatural agility. "We need to find a way out," Nathan yelled over his shoulder, his breath coming in heavy gasps. "Head for the light." Eliza pointed towards a faint glow she noticed off to their right, beyond the dense trees. It was a long shot, but it was their only hope. As they made their way towards the light, the terrain grew more treacherous. The ground was slick with moisture, and heavy vines hung low, grasping at them like hands trying to pull them back. Eliza's legs ached, and her lungs burned with the cold air, but the fear of what lurked behind them pushed her forward. Finally, they broke through the tree line, stumbling into a clearing. The light was coming from an old gas lamp, flickering atop a small wooden cabin. They didn't stop to think, rushing to the door and pounding on it desperately. After what felt like an eternity, the door swung open, revealing an old man with a wary expression. "What in the world?" he started to ask, but Eliza cut him off. "Please, we need to come in. It's after us." Without a word, the man pulled them inside and slammed the door shut. Eliza and Nathan leaned against it, panting as the old man locked it securely. "Who's after you?" the man asked, turning to face them with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "The creeper," Eliza managed to say between breaths. "We saw it. It chased us here." The man's eyes widened slightly, then he nodded slowly. "You're lucky to have made it this far. That creature doesn't take kindly to strangers in its swamp, especially on a night like this." Eliza and Nathan exchanged a look, the reality of their situation sinking in. They were safe for the moment, but they were far from out of danger. The night was still young, and the blood moon watched silently from above. Inside the small, dimly lit cabin, Eliza and Nathan caught their breath, their hearts still racing from the harrowing chase. The old man, who introduced himself as Harold, set about stoking the fire in a small, rusty wood stove, casting flickering shadows across the room filled with worn furniture and old hunting trophies. "Why are you out there on a night like this?" Harold asked, his voice gruff with concern as he tossed another log into the fire. "We were trying to document the creeper," Eliza explained, her voice still shaky. "I'm a photographer. I thought if we approached respectfully, maybe? I don't know, maybe it would be different." Harold shook his head slowly, the firelight illuminating the deep lines etched into his weathered face. "Respect or not, that thing doesn't want to be seen. You stir up the old tales, and you stir up the trouble that comes with them." Nathan, who had been silent, chimed in, "We heard it before we saw it. It was like it was everywhere around us." "Is it always like that?" "It knows these woods better than anyone," Harold replied, sitting down heavily in an overstuffed chair. "It can move through the swamp and the trees without making a sound. That's how it hunts, how it survives." Eliza pulled out her camera, checking it over for damage. "We saw it clearly tonight. Those eyes, there's something almost human about them." She looked up at Harold. "Have you ever seen it, Harold?" A few times over the years," Harold admitted, his eyes narrowing as he stared into the fire. "Each time was enough to make me steer clear of the swamp at night. It's not just a beast, it's something older, something different." There was a long silence as they each considered his words. The wind howled outside, the sound eerie and mournful as it passed through the trees. "So, what do we do now?" Nathan asked, breaking the silence. "We can't stay here forever. We need a plan." Harold looked from Nathan to Eliza, his gaze stern. "Tonight, you stay here. It's not safe to go wandering about with the creeper stirred up. Come morning, you'll have a better chance of making it out of the swamp without crossing its path again." Eliza nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Thank you, Harold, for letting us in. We owe you our lives." "Don't mention it," Harold replied gruffly. "Just promise me you'll think twice before chasing after such creatures again." "We will," Eliza assured him, a promise forming deep within her. This encounter had changed something fundamental in her approach to her work. The thrill of the chase had been real, but so was the danger. As they settled in for the night, each found a spot to rest in the cramped space of the cabin. The wind continued to howl outside, a constant reminder of the wildness that lay just beyond the thin wooden walls. Inside, the fire crackled warmly, a small beacon of safety in the vast, dark swamp. Eliza lay awake for a long time, listening to the creaks and groans of the old cabin. She thought about the creeper, its mysterious nature, and what its existence meant for the swamp and those who dared to tread its paths. Her camera lay beside her, filled with unseen images that would have to wait until daylight to be revealed. As her eyes finally closed, her last thoughts were of the glowing red eyes watching from the shadows, and the uneasy truce they had reached, if only for the night. The morning light crept through the small, dusty window of Harold's cabin, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Eliza was the first to wake, her mind immediately returning to the events of the previous night. She quietly rolled up her sleeping bag and began examining her camera, hoping her photographs had captured the creeper's eerie presence. Nathan stirred, his eyes blinking open as he adjusted to the dim light. "Morning," he mumbled, rubbing his face. "Did you sleep at all?" "Not much," Eliza admitted, handing him a cup of coffee Harold had started earlier on the old stove. "I kept thinking about everything that happened. We got lucky, Nathan. Really lucky." Nathan took the coffee, his hands cradling the warm mug. "Yeah, I know. That thing. It was like nothing I've ever seen before." "You think Harold's right? That it's more than just an animal?" Eliza sighed, scrolling through the images on her digital camera. "I think it might be. Look at these." She tilted the screen towards Nathan, showing him a blurry, yet distinctly unsettling photo of the creeper's glowing eyes and shadowy form. "Wow, you actually got it," Nathan said, his voice a mix of awe and fear. "It's terrifying and fascinating all at once." Eliza nodded, then looked up as Harold entered the room, his footsteps heavy on the creaky floorboards. "Morning, Harold." "Thanks for the coffee," she said, offering a small smile. Harold nodded gruffly. "You're welcome. What's the plan for today? You heading back to town?" "We should," Nathan replied, But we also need to think about what we're going to do with these photos. What do you think, Eliza? Should we show them to anyone? Eliza paused, considering the implications. I don't know yet. Harold, you've lived here a long time. What do you think people will do if they see these pictures? Harold took a long, deep breath, his eyes fixed on the fire. If you show those pictures around, they'll be more than just curiosity. Some will want to hunt it, others might try to exploit it. But none of that will be good for the creeper or this place. You mean it could ruin the balance? Eliza asked, her finger hesitating over the delete button. Exactly, Harold confirmed. This swamp, the creature, it's all part of a bigger system. Stir that up, and you might not like what you find. Eliza and Nathan exchanged a glance, the weight of responsibility settling over them. Maybe it's best if we keep this to ourselves for now, Eliza finally said, turning off her camera. At least until we can understand more. Nathan nodded in agreement. I think you're right. We can use this experience to educate, not sensationalize. Good choice, Harold said with a nod. Now, let me help you get back to town. We'll take the old road out. It's safer and should keep you well clear of the swamp paths. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to leave, Eliza felt a mix of relief and regret. The mystery of the creeper would remain just that. A mystery preserved in her memory and her heart, rather than exposed to the world's harsh light. Thank you, Harold, for everything, Eliza said as they stepped outside into the fresh morning air. Just take care of yourselves and remember, some things are better left unseen, Harold replied, watching them go. With one last look at the quiet cabin and the surrounding woods, Eliza and Nathan headed back toward civilization, the secret of the creeper safe between them. Their adventure had ended, but the story of the swamp and its guardian would continue, whispered among the trees and hidden in the shadows. The journey back to town was quiet, contemplative. Eliza and Nathan walked side by side, each lost in thought over the night's terrifying and wondrous events. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor, a stark contrast to the eerie, moonlit terror of the swamp they had experienced. As they neared the outskirts of town, Eliza stopped, glancing back toward the dense foliage that concealed the swamp. Nathan, do you think we did the right thing, keeping the photos to ourselves? Nathan considered her question, his brows furrowing slightly. I think so. It's not just about what we want or what could make a good story. It's about protecting something that's been here much longer than us. Eliza nodded, feeling the weight of the camera around her neck. I guess some stories are meant to be experienced, not shared. That's a mature way to look at it, Nathan replied. But you still have your experience, and no one can take that away from you. Eliza smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. Let's make one last stop before we leave Marshwood Vale for good. Curious, Nathan followed as she led him back towards the edge of the swamp. They stopped at a safe distance, just before the trees began to thicken. What are we doing? Nathan asked, watching her. Eliza pulled out her camera, turning it on and scrolling through the photos she'd taken. One by one, she reviewed them, each image a haunting reminder of their encounter. Finally, she looked up at Nathan. I want to delete the photos here, where it happened. It feels right, like letting go. Nathan nodded in understanding. Do you want me to do it? Eliza handed him the camera. Would you? I think I'd prefer not to watch. With a solemn nod, Nathan deleted the photos, erasing the tangible proof of their encounter, leaving only their memories. When he was done, he handed the camera back to her. It's done, he said gently. Eliza took a deep breath, her gaze lingering on the swamp. Thank you. Let's go home. As they walked back, Eliza felt lighter, though a part of her would always remain in the depths of Marshwood Vale, intertwined with the mystery of the creeper. They reached the town in silence, each step taking them further from the wild and closer to their everyday lives. Before they went their separate ways, Nathan stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. Hey, Eliza, just remember, we went through something few will ever understand. That's got to count for something. It does, Eliza agreed, giving him a small, grateful smile. Maybe we can come back someday, not to seek the creeper, but to appreciate the wild from a respectful distance. I'd like that, Nathan said, a return, but on different terms. With a final nod to each other, they parted ways, each carrying the silent, sacred knowledge of their shared experience. Eliza looked back once more, her heart full of stories she would never tell, knowing some mysteries were richer when left unshared, preserved only in the heart of the wild where they belonged.